This is the official novelization of Mother 1, also known as EarthBound Beginnings. It has a lot of bizarre things in it, and some very different elements from the video game that are disturbing, strange, and outright disgusting. And we're going through the entire thing, all 10 chapters. Chapter 0, however, is the book itself. Look at this little guy. This book is just a baby, and would have run you about 440 yen in 1989, which is about $3 USD today. This is essentially a light novel, a type of novella popular in Japan that's basically young adult fiction, and are often tie-ins for games, anime, and even mangas. Not to be confused with light novels, he's actually not even in this one. So let's get into the novel itself, shall we? It was written by Saori Kumi, and she was given total freedom to tell the story as she saw fit, and boy did she. Let's dive in. The first and largest change is the novel doesn't even start at the beginning. It does more so towards the middle, starting in Snowman. This is because the novel doesn't present Ninten's perspective. It's actually from Anna's. The town of Snowman has also been moved. While it's likely meant to be somewhere like Alaska and Mother 1's America, here it's right near the North Pole. I assume this was an inference made based on the train station being called Santa Claus Station. Anyway, Anna is a young girl who's pretty much never left her hometown before, and her dad is the pastor of the church. So far, so accurate. Anna and her father have been facing some emotional hardships though since her mother went missing about a month ago from Youngtown, a place she recently traveled to do work with their church, where many alien abductions have been recently reported from. Anna has powerful magical capabilities, PSI, and has been receiving visions and telepathic messages from a mysterious boy from somewhere else, much like Ness and Paula's connection in EarthBound. This boy has been going on an adventure, along with his friend Lloyd, and this boy is none other than Ken. Yep, here's one of the most notable changes from the game. Ninten is now Ken, and they only get more different from here, so get ready for things to get even weirder, especially towards the end of the novel. Ken is described as rash and violent, oblivious of others' feelings, and a bit of an airhead. This iteration of the character is quite different, and reminds me a lot more of Sun Wukong from Journey to the West than this little guy. But I think the novelist did a very good job demonstrating why this is, which we'll get to in a little bit. It's also explained that part of their journey is searching for the Kannon flower, the only cure for Lloyd's dying mother. Anna's father usually prays while he's not actively doing his pastoral work, and it makes for a slightly strained relationship with his daughter. The chapter wraps up with Ken and Lloyd reaching the church and returning Anna's hat to her, which they found at the train station in the town of Reindeer. The book really seems to suggest that she's never left Snowman before, so not sure how we got there, but I digress. Here we get the first real taste of Ken's personality. Geez, the world's in chaos and I gotta spend my time doing dumb little chores like this? Oh, finally. I even said to myself, I bet it belongs to some dumb, stupid girl, and there she is. What a pain in my... Anna cuts him off to explain she already knows the duo, and announces she's joining them on their adventure, to the dismay of her father. Lloyd introduces themselves as the Global Defense Force, which is an undeniably awesome name, and I will be referring to them by it instead of Chosen 4 V1 from now on. They're doing their best, so please show them your support by commenting, "We love you, Global Defense Force." She finally convinces her father to let her go, and she catches more of Ken's thoughts telepathically, revealing he has some real issues. He also thinks some racy things about Anna, which earns him a smack on the face. He's unaware she can hear him if you haven't picked up on that. Ken is described as having long blonde bangs and freckles, further separating him from his in-game counterpart, and I want to discuss this more in a minute. Lloyd welcomes Anna to the party, and the newly formed trio head towards the train station. Into Chapter 2, as they head down the mountain, they encounter a pack of wolves. Though I know it wasn't, it really does at times feel like the novel was being written as the author was playing the game, with how she describes the enemies and stuff. During the battle, Anna gets nearly killed, though Ken saves her. First time of many. A wolf also cut off part of her hair, revealing she has black hair, very different from most official artwork. Though he saved her, Ken scolds her and basically suggests she's slowing them down and is dead weight. He continues on ahead, but Lloyd consoles her, explaining his harsh ways. The author gave him a real Holden Caulfield vibe, which I kinda dig. Lloyd is said to have bangs, and though this doesn't come up until much later, is eventually described as having chestnut hair, brown. All the characters are described as being very visually set apart from the original ones. And I bring this up now because I want to explain my personal understanding as to why I think author Kumi decided to make these specific changes. With the toy giving her full creative freedom on the project, I think she decided to change their look so drastically to communicate that to the reader. that this is a tie-in product, so it's assumed the consumer has at least some acquaintance with the original, even if it's just a commercial. So I think her making this choice is her telling the reader directly, I know this is different from the game. It's its own thing, and is not canon. At least with things that happen later, I sure hope it isn't. A detail I really like is that the evil is described as leaving the wolves after they're defeated, as it communicates very clearly they're not just attacking animals unprovoked, like so many seem to misunderstand about this series. At the train station, we see Ken is vaguely paranoid about everyone they see as being an alien in disguise, and looks for a phone to call his dad. He explains to Anna his father works for a news organization and is connected to government officials, so he calls regularly to get the latest intel on the alien invasion going on. And as far as cramming game mechanics into other mediums go, not bad, not bad. That said, the justification is still pretty funny to me just because it seems so unnecessary and is aged so oddly with this whole don't trust the fake news type of vibe when Ken describes it. They ride the train to Spokane, and find it seems to be a pretty dangerous place, so they seek out shelter for the night. When asking around, Ken hears some people talk about a haunted house nearby with a piano that keeps playing a melody all on its own. I think this is an advantage of using Anna's point of view to tell the story, as it sounds sort of benign and random in the moment to her, the surrogate for the reader, but opens this intrigue for both of them to want to know more. And I know I just made fun of the whole dad phone thing, but I do actually think this is a much better, more organic way to first introduce the melodies. The interaction turns hostile, with all the townspeople flipping on them like a switch, leading to a battle against all of them, seemingly under some kind of mass hypnosis. Now, immediately running contrary to all the positives I just explained with introducing the melodies, I do have a complaint here. While some mechanics are integrated well and others sort of middling, there are others that sort of suck. And I don't think it's the writer's fault completely, as they're just trying to produce something faithful-ish to the game. And because it's based on an RPG, this leads to several groaner lines like this. When suddenly the word delinquency plunged itself into her eardrums, she instantly lost about a third of her hit points. And in a panic, she covered her ears tightly. And I know that doesn't seem that bad, but trust me, there are a lot worse offenders of this later too. It just feels really lame and forced. This is a problem with a lot of game adaptations in particular.
How am I supposed to do that?
With the power-ups. They give us special abilities.
I said it's not the writer's fault completely, but I do wish he left these out because they still suck. Anna eventually grabs Lloyd's mocha spray and uses it on all of them, which I think is implied to be some sort of like caffeine stimulant that breaks the townspeople's spell. I looked it up, but couldn't find anything, so that's my best guess. Lloyd fell unconscious during the fight, so Ken uses some of his healing magic to help him out. Anna can tell hers is more powerful, but she finds something calming in seeing Ken being so gentle, giving her, and the reader, more insight to his character, that he's not all crude under his rough exterior. The chapter ends with her reflecting on her feelings for Lloyd and Ken, starting to develop some feelings for Ken while acknowledging though Lloyd is sweeter, he's not all that helpful in dangerous situations. Chapter 3 opens with the party arriving at the haunted house, and seeing 3 conflicting signs. Anna suggests calling the phone number on one of them that lists it as for sale to try and secure a place to stay. Anna's become a bit frustrated, being left in the dark, and Lloyd explains their search for the melodies to her, and sums up the quest so far to her, Queen Mary, Magican, all that jazz, saying they have 3 of them so far. Something I really like is how it explains throughout the adventure Ken has been slowly regaining his PSI abilities, since they've laid dormant since he was very young. It feels like an intuitive way to explain leveling up, at least more so than
With the power-ups.
Something weird though is how it doesn't actually explain how he got to Magican, but we'll discuss this more later. Something I'm not huge on though is how it just sort of skims over the first 3 melodies. One came from a music box in Ken's house after he exorcised it. One came from Miss Laura of the Canary Village, and one came from a singing monkey at the zoo. Like, it's almost comical how interesting all that sounds, yet they're just skipping over it. I know I said this is clearly for those with some familiarity with the game, but as a novel, it's so odd to exclude things that are made to sound so fun. This is a shortcoming for the adaptation, I think. They call the phone number and meet Mr. Rosewater. Curious as to why they chose this specific name, as the mansion of the game is called Rosemary's, but I think it could be a reference to Elliot Rosewater, a character from several of Kurt Vonnegut's books, seeing as Itoy really loves his work. He even inspired the Mr. Saturns and Mother too. Rosewater also has a shy daughter named Evangeline. He welcomes them to his place where they all have a big feast, and it's explained the house has to remain pure for Evangeline to eventually inherit with her future husband, and that he won't let anyone not blood-related in. Anna gets a haircut from Evangeline's tutor, who she hopes can even it up a bit, but she ends up shortening it even more. The party rests for the night. The next day, Ken is furious with Lloyd, who offered him to be betrothed to Evangeline the night before. You have to be kidding me! Lloyd, if that's what it was gonna take, why didn't you sign yourself up for it? And what are you going to be doing in the meantime? Don't tell me that while we're out scrapping with the ghosts, you plan on just sitting here and resting your lazy bones. Wait, lazy bones? After lots of arguing, Anna storms off and laments how despite her and Ken's strong mental connection, they seem as distant as ever mere feet away from each other. This eventually results in Ken being entrusted with the key to the mansion by Rosewater, but he brings Anna and Lloyd anyway, so not sure how much that mattered. They enter the house and encounter a rat, which Anna communicates with via her telepathy. Anna asks him if he knows where the piano is, which he hilariously responds to by asking, "What's a piano?" in the most realistic depiction of an interaction between a human and animal I've ever seen in fiction. Yet he somehow knows what hell is. This rat is a total jerk though and starts attacking her and calls in a ton more, which start basically flooding the room and drowning them all and blinding Anna. However, Ken rescues her, again. He picks her up and holds her close, and they all take off running through the house, a huge maze of corridors and rooms that all resemble each other. Around this point, the team also starts going by the name The Warriors, which I think is pretty cool. They finally realize they're going in circles and start heading back up a flight of stairs they came down from. On the stairs though, they get caught between two sets of Haunted Knight's armor at the top and a ghost at the bottom. Lloyd tries to fend off the ghost with his boomerang, which leads to another groaner line. It multiplied. Aha, these guys are sort of like alarm clocks, aren't they? It appears they have a habit of calling out for their friends by sending out a loud sound right as they're about to kick the bucket. This is tough. Oh, I know, I'll call them alarm ghosts. Meanwhile, Ken attempts to fight the knights, but gets overwhelmed and goes into a coughing fit due to his asthma. Anna, caught in the middle, watches as both of her friends are getting their heads handed to them. She breaks down and has a realistic depiction of a panic attack. Lloyd gives her a weak smile though, which awakens something in her. She focuses all her power and unleashes a huge burst of light, destroying all the enemies at once. Ken and Lloyd are shocked by this. Ken teases her for hiding this immense power, and Lloyd expresses his admiration. This scene is pretty violent and really highlights just how much darker the novel is than the game. It's super brutal, and Anna's use of PSI here reminds me a lot of like a Persona awakening. It's all still pretty overwhelming to her, and she cries, hugging an oblivious Ken. The warriors then realize the light from Anna's attack also revealed the true path through the mansion, leading them to a room with the piano and awarding them their fourth melody. With all that behind them, they now face the remaining issue, Ken's engagement. This is solved, however, when they get back to Rosewater, and he announces the marriage is off. The family's fortune-telling book says a mirror breaking is a sign of an unlucky marriage, and that morning, all of Evangeline's broke. The boys celebrate, but Anna realizes it was likely due to her outburst of magic from before, indirectly making her responsible for it. The three regroup and set out for the fifth melody. On to Chapter 4, the gang sets out into the Yucca Desert, as they struggle to press on, overcome by the immense heat. They keep wanting to give up, but convince themselves not to, thinking, what if the next melody is just over the next sand dune? There's a little excerpt from a travel book describing the conditions of the desert, but none of the warriors have read it. The novel also introduces Lloyd's high-tech wristwatch, which also works as a compass, keeping them on track towards Mount Atoy. This is also when it's explained he's worked mostly in highly air-conditioned rooms with his computers, making this especially rough on him. He collapses from exhaustion. At this point, Ken and Anna decide it's time for a short break. Each of them has a few sports drinks, which are just accidentally called Pocari Sweat at one point, a popular sports drink in Japan. Ken gives one of his to Anna, and as she drinks it, thinks about how it's technically like an indirect kiss. Cheeky. The fan translation I'm reading, that was done by Nyasu Nekoban, localizes the sports drink to Gatorade, which I learned by reading this apparently used to come in cans. This is probably common knowledge, but seeing it just feels so wrong to me. In my mind, the only thing they can be in were those obscenely phallic bottles. Anyway, this is a nice moment, Ken sharing his drink with her, even though resources are limited and he's very thirsty. It's a nice way to demonstrate more about his character through his actions, which is especially important in this medium, because as they say, actions speak louder than words. Anyway, I love my dog. Ken says he wishes the train was running to make their lives easier, even fantasizing about, quote, making a peace sign and trying to get a bunch of souvenir photos, which is an insane accidental call forward to Mother 2. I am starting to feel like a toy lifted elements from this book to include in it, but I just can't prove it. Anna wipes Lloyd with the sports drink and suddenly hears a baby crying, calling her name. She's not sure what to make of it, but dismisses it as a mirage. Ken spots something flying above, a ton of UFOs. The three hide on the side of a dune in its shadow, but a scorpion approaches Lloyd and looks like it's about to strike him with its poison. Anna just straight up undertails the scorpion, using her telepathy to calmly soothe it and convince it not to attack him. They can catch their breath. Then Ken sends it flying with his bat. Anna gets really mad at him and starts pelting him with sand, yelling at him, calling him a bully, and even a sadist. Funniest, she actually accuses him of being a tax collector, a weirdly biblical insult. In all the chaos, Lloyd reminds them of the aliens directly above them, causing them to quickly quiet down. They flatten themselves against the dune again, and the UFOs fly right past them towards Marysville, Lloyd's hometown. Ken then spots something else flying after the fleet, and immediately recognizes it as an airplane, down to its exact model. Ken is apparently a military fanatic, breaking out into a detailed explanation of it, and revealing he's apparently seen Dirty Harry. The plane's wings snap, sending it right towards them. Anna and Lloyd make a break for it, but Ken, hypnotized by his obsession, watches as it flies dead towards him. The plane stops mere inches from his face, and Ken faints from it all. The pilot gets out of the cockpit, introducing himself as the old man of the desert. Lloyd fixes the plane. This, mixed with Ken's fixation on it, earns the old man's trust. He invites them back to his secret base. After flying there, they have a nice hearty meal. Lloyd asks to borrow the plane, but he declines, citing its condition. The warriors explain their situation to him, and moved, he offers to personally escort them anywhere with his plane they need to go, and even says he thinks he may know where the next melody could be. He leads them through his greenhouse that's full of incredible flowers and produce, and says he recently found a singing cactus there. They search for it and come across a small talking plant that says, "Feed me!" that feeds on blood. This is definitely a direct reference to Little Shop of Horrors, which makes me very happy as it's one of my all-time favorite movies.
What do you want me to do, slit my wrists?
I also love this exchange. "Feed me," it said. "Whoa," cried the old man as he waved his hands back and forth. "Unfortunately, that's not what we're looking for. Don't you mind that one." "But I think it's asking to be fed," said Lloyd. "I'm telling you this for your own good, kid. Just leave that one alone." Peak writing. They also ask the old man if he has a Kanon flower they could use to cure Lloyd's mom, but sadly he does not. After tireless searching, they're sadly unable to find the singing cactus. But the old man suggests they look for it in the nearby ruins the next day, as he says there are many of them there. They agree to rest for the night and set out for it tomorrow. That night, they borrow some sleeping bags and spend the night at the secret base. Ken's loud snoring leads Anna and Lloyd to move away from him, and lay under a hole in the roof that allows them to see the stars. Lloyd then tells Anna something pretty significant. He says before he met her and Ken, he felt insignificant in the world, to the point that he wouldn't have really cared if he died. But now, with their friendship, he's rethought this, and no longer wants to die a meaningless death. He holds her hand and affirms his goal to help them protect the world. The next morning, the pilot flies the gang to the ancient ruins. After landing, Anna hears the baby from earlier's voice again, telling her there's a passageway to Magicant somewhere in the ruins. There are many cacti around, and they realize they're all humming the fifth melody, netting them yet another one. Ken and Lloyd prep to leave, but Anna insists on what she heard, and eventually convinces them to go deeper into the ruins, to the distress of the old man who flies away. They traverse the caves, being bothered by monkeys as they do, but eventually come to a dead end. Anna starts questioning herself, wondering if the voice was once again just her imagination, or a trick from the enemies, attempting to lure them into a trap. Feeling guilty she may have led them to their demise, she calls out in her mind to the voice. Just then, the ruins begin shaking violently, and the surrounding walls begin to crumble. The fissures end up separating her from the boys, on a small ledge that's not going to hold. Ken calls out to her to jump across, but frozen in fear, she can't move. This causes Ken to try and make the jump himself to her. Seeing him about to do this, it finally gives her the push to jump. She leaps just as the ledge crumbles, but doesn't quite make it, and is now falling into the abyss. Just before Ken catches her by the wrist. The three are now daisy-chained together, Anna held by Ken, who is holding on to the handle of his bat, with Lloyd holding the other on the ledge, though his grip is starting to slip. Anna, feeling defeated, tells Ken to just let her go, but he refuses. Thinking quick, he tells her to climb up him back onto the ledge. She slowly makes her way up his body until she's literally standing on his head. Not sure what to do though, she stops as helpless as before. Suddenly, they realize the very loud noise above them. It's the old man from before. He calls out to them with his megaphone and throws down a rope ladder. They grab onto it one by one and get to safety. From the plane, Anna can see a tall spire with a bell, realizing the crumbling of the ruins must have revealed it. Ken commands the old man to bring them there. They draw towards it, and Ken, with his bat, strikes the bell. The sound is loud and echoes through the desert. Suddenly, a mysterious light emerges around the tower, and the warriors drift off, losing consciousness. The party enters Magicant, a strange, very pink world, home to many small, nice people. The whole environment is so stereotypically feminine it actually sickens Anna, but she sees Ken and Lloyd are in an almost hypnotic state, infatuated with the world and its people. The townspeople lead them to Queen Mary. This rendition of Magicant is a lot less laid back than the game. Though it's definitely a reprieve, it still has this strange Twin Peaks-esque undertone to it, like how they describe the cords on the soldiers' spears. But rather than yet another shade of pink, these cords were more of a wine red, and it gave them the dreadful appearance of having just finished stabbing someone to death. The queen offers them presents and feasts, but Anna, fed up with the off-kilter nature of the place, interrupts her to everyone's discomfort. She asks why they were brought to this place while their world is still very much in crisis, and explains that it makes it hard to relax. Everyone around her remains silent. Anna braces to be full-on executed for speaking in such a way to the queen, and Lloyd and Ken seem to break out of their trance, standing beside her. The queen, however, responds calmly, saying all she wanted to do was bestow gifts to them and see their faces, explaining she acts as a mother to all, but admits to seeing how this is selfish. She still at least gives them their gifts. Ken gets a new reddish-pink hat, which she says will influence righteous hearts to follow him. She gives Lloyd some new glasses, with silver frames and pink-tinted lenses. She explains they demonstrate his intelligence and perseverance, saying they'll help him to think clearly in desperate times. There's also another lame line here, saying, it was as if his wisdom had leveled up. Ugh. Finally, Anna receives Queen Mary's very own heart-shaped ruby necklace. Mary tells her it's a symbol of love and truth, then sends her a message telepathically. Anna's told it's her responsibility as the woman of the group to help turn the boys into real men. And oh boy, will we get to that when we get to that. Anna, overwhelmed by the responsibility, tries to return it. Mary then gets weirdly cutthroat with Anna, saying, "Don't act so naive now. Where's that courage you had a moment ago? I hope you understand that you and I are, in some ways, clear-cut enemies, but in other ways, we are also exactly alike. So please, before I take the necklace back into my own hands, go, now." And with that, sends them away back to their world in a vortex. Anna wakes up in a forest, surrounded by a group of little kids, though she doesn't see Ken or Lloyd around anywhere. She realizes she's made it to Youngtown, where her own mother went missing. This triggers her to start barking at a young red-haired girl for information, causing her to cry, which then leads to all the children crying. Suddenly, Ken shows up and sings a song, off-key, and does a silly little dance, captivating the children and leading them to join in, which I think is meant to demonstrate the influence of his new Magicant hat. Eventually, they finish singing and dancing, and all the children are calmed down. One of the kids, Amy, explains all the adults from the village disappeared, and she's been effectively leading the children ever since. So, break for a second, it's probably pretty obvious, but Amy is literally just Little Orphan Annie, the main character from the American comic strip and musical film. She has red hair, is a rough-around-the-edges orphan, says the head of the orphanage is named Miss Hannigan, another character from the franchise, and even outright says the sun will come out tomorrow. No subtlety here. I was curious what the interest with Annie was, since, from my research, I couldn't find anything showing she was a popular character outside the United States. After doing some more digging though, apparently since the mid-1980s, Japan has had annual productions of it that even continue to grow in popularity to this very day. Anyway, just then, something comes flying in the air towards them, which they assume is some sort of UFO, but it turns out to be a floating wicker basket carrying a baby. This baby is named Noel, and Amy explains he showed up on the orphanage doorstep on Christmas, which might suggest this invasion has been going on for quite some time, seeing as it's inferred that this is taking place in the spring. The symbolism with his name and being found on Christmas is also pretty obvious, so I don't think we need to dwell on that. Noel can also speak and says he can teleport them to the city of Ely, suggesting seeking the next melody there first before going to Mount Toy, but that he's too tired at the moment from healing Lloyd of a bug bite and needs to rest first. So yeah, he's obviously the baby from Youngtown in the game, even down to the teleporting. The kids offer the Global Defense Force any clothes they need, since there were so many left behind from the adults. Ken dons a bomber jacket, which many fans often draw him in. Anna dresses essentially like Little Red Riding Hood, cape and all, and Lloyd wears a flannel, jeans, and warm vest. They settle for the night and prepare to head to Ely. The next day, they're off and arrive in Ely, a rundown, trash-filled, crime-ridden, hostile city. So basically like a safer version of Detroit. Noel actually joins them on their quest, but is asleep from the teleporting, and they're carrying him around in his basket. They wander around the city, getting a feel for things as they try to seek out the next melody. They go to a park where they see many odd things, as well as a polluted ocean to the disappointment of Anna, who was excited to see it for the first time in person. Also, side note, but I think the integration of teleport into the story is a bit sloppy. It feels like it's just there to expedite the journey a bit, because we never hear more about the swamp or anything. It's not awful by any means, just sort of feels like it's slapped in there. After wandering around some more, they run into a biker gang near a warehouse. Their large bearded leader is frustrated and getting violent with the rest of them due to the issues with his motorcycle. His second in command, a lanky man, explains it's due to the software on the computer and the bike itself are incompatible, which is where Lloyd steps in. He explains what he thinks the issues are and is asked for his help. Overjoyed at the opportunity, he agrees and fixes it in just a few minutes. Pleased with his work, the gruff biker looks the group over, seeing the baby, and has no idea what to make of them. Lamenting the city is no place for good little kids, and rides off with his gang. They go into the nearby supermarket where Anna and Lloyd gather supplies while Ken looks for a phone to call his dad. There's a bit of a weird moment where an old man at the store sees Anna, Noel, and Lloyd and assumes they're Noel's parents, which, weird, but I think in reality is meant to demonstrate the state of Ely more than anything else. This interaction, reasonably, makes Anna a bit uncomfortable, to which Lloyd turns around and asks her what she thinks about a Carl Sagan quote regarding children's sexual development and urges. This is the Wild West, dude. Ken concludes the phones in the area seem to be out of service, while Lloyd talks to the janitor at the store, who tells him he's performing at a place called the Live House downtown that night. The group decides that would be a good place to look for the next melody. Later that evening, they head to the Live House, finding the show is completely sold out. They go around to different vendors to no success, and eventually cut a deal with a scalper. Ken plays games with him, getting him down to $120 for the tickets from the initial $150, but the scalper sees he was lying about it being all he had and is forced back into the full $150, putting Ken in a bad mood. Regardless though, they score the tickets. They kill some time in the park ahead of the show. Anna has an interesting mother moment, taking care of Noel, a lot of emphasis placed on it here, and wonders if this is what Queen Mary meant when she said she's a mother to all. It invigorates her, making her more determined than ever to save the world, to one day become a mother herself. Want to mention this because it's very thematically important, and we'll get more into why later. Once night falls, the desolate city changes into a vibrant one, with music, lights, and people dancing ahead of the concert. Anna caves to the rock and roll despite her father's objections to it and has a really great time. They wait in line for a while and finally get to the front to enter, only to find out their tickets are fake. Ken gets really mad, kicking a trash can. Then the ever-enlightened Lloyd with his clear thoughts glasses comes to a truly illuminated conclusion. They break in. This leads into a fight with the security themselves, who all know martial arts. Again, an interesting call forward somewhat to EarthBound. This causes a huge racket and draws the attention of someone, the lanky man from before, and the headliner himself, Hurricane Joe, who is none other than the bearded gang leader from before. Seeing Lloyd and company, he offers to allow them to see the show. They watch Joe and his band, made up of his biker gang, perform a pretty emotional show, and Joe wraps it up with a powerful ballad about a never-ending journey. But despite its beauty, the trio can't help but feel a bit disappointed it's not the melody they're looking for. Back in his dressing room after the show, they explain their journey to him, and that they're headed for Mount Atoy, seeing him as a trustworthy adult. They're interrupted by management though, who bring flowers from Joe's fans in, including a Canon flower. Lloyd begs Joe for it, who can't help but oblige. Anna wakes up Noel, who I guess slept through the concert, and tells him they need to head back to Lloyd's hometown, Marysville. But before she can explain things to Joe and his band, Noel, still groggy, teleports them all to the streets of Marysville, actually leading into Chapter 7. The musicians, understandably, are in shock, and Noel falls back to sleep before he can rectify the issue. It's even described by the musicians as
totally Kafkaesque.
Lloyd immediately takes off towards his home to his sick mother. Now, here's a twist that actually surprised me a bit. Anna follows him to find out Lloyd and his single mother are actually very well off in a huge house, greatly contrasting the view of his home life that the novel has definitely been leading the reader to perceive. However, he can't find his mother. Panicking, thinking she may have died while he was away, he rushes to his neighbor's house, Sam Walker. Sam is an old veteran, and explains to Lloyd recently all the mothers in town have been abducted, and that the fathers left to join the war efforts. Which, also, abducting mothers specifically?
Okay, let's connect this guy. Let's connect this guy with themes.
Great detail. More later. Ken and the band arrive, and Sam welcomes them all inside, albeit like a literal drill sergeant. Inside, they all have pancakes and tea and catch up with one another's stories. There is this line about the tea, though. It gives you vitality and builds up your strength. Which is...
Oh, brother!
Hearing about the melodies, Sam points to his old jukebox. Ken approaches it, recognizing a familiar mark on it, and, in one of the most creative moments of the story in my opinion, takes out the Franklin badge and uses it as a token for the machine, and it plays the 6th melody. It's not perfect. I really wish this was teased throughout the story instead of coming up here out of nowhere, and the badge hasn't done anything up to this point, but as someone who just loves the series' iconography, I still think it's quite a creative moment. We'll say though, it's disappointing this means no magic and dragon in the story, which would have been cool. Listening to the melody, the band plays along with it for a nice harmonious moment. Another similarity to EarthBound, by the way, Joe and his band are a bit like the Runaway Five, just in that they're a band who tag along. Less strong than some others, but I couldn't help but notice it. Worried about the kidnappings, Ken decides to phone home and finds out from his sisters that his mother was also abducted. With a newfound determination in everyone, they make preparations to fight back. They start by getting Ken's sisters to Marysville with everyone else, and Joe collecting info from the townspeople. Lloyd, worried, confesses he can't figure out the aliens' motivation, hoping finding the final melody will reveal their true intentions. The Global Defense Force makes final preparations for Mount Atoy, but are stopped by Joe. He expresses he thinks they need to slow down and not rush into a fight they can't win, and suggests that Lloyd is too valuable to lose, being the brains of the operation. For this reason, he says Lloyd should stay in Marysville where he's safe, and that he'll go instead. With that, Joe joins the party. Already, they start driving the band's SUV up the mountain outside Ely. Into Chapter 8, the warriors head up the winding mountainside. Him and Ken talk shop about girls, while Anna is annoyed and isolated in the back seat. Joe talks about the women he likes, and Anna waits intently to find out Ken's type. But before he can say anything, they come to a huge tree blocking the road. Ken and Joe try unsuccessfully to move it, leading to Anna's powers being needed. She warns Joe not to freak out before using them, then vaporizes the tree. He does not listen. The car ride continues, with him much quieter than before. The trio arrives at a limestone cavern and get out of the car, continuing on foot. The dark path becomes confusing even with Joe's directions, and starts to feel like a dream. Anna in particular feels disconnected, like the group is always some sort of boys-only club, excluding her, first with Lloyd and Ken, and now with Joe and Ken, but even more so now with Joe being a fully grown adult. Lost in her thoughts, she stumbles across a stream going through the cave that pours into a massive, freezing cold lake. Joe warns her it's dangerously cold, and him and Ken press on. Anna, however, entranced, can't stop looking at the water, which is the same color as Ken's eyes. She thinks about how it'd be a peaceful way to preserve a corpse, maintained in the cold isolation. She walks to the edge of the connected lake and touches it, finding out it's surprisingly warm, and drinks it. Ken returns, looking for her. She then convinces him to drink some, and he partakes as well. He puts his face in the water, and after he comes out, their eyes meet, with the couple realizing their shared feelings for one another, and they can't help but fall completely in love with each other. They lock hands and join back up with Joe. They emerge on the other side of the cave, completely focused on each other, to the point of being completely oblivious of the many enemies that have them surrounded, leaving only Joe to fight them. A swarm of robots attacks, but Ken and Anna create a powerful PSI shield to protect themselves, causing the enemies to refocus their assaults specifically on Joe. Their focus stays on one another. Suddenly, a baby's cry shakes them out of their infatuation, and realize they're on a battlefield. They now see the remnants of many robots around, and Joe, who is severely injured. They realize they were in a powerful trance, and their time together flees from their minds, much like a disappearing memory of a dream. The two rush over to Joe, who's unresponsive. They use their PSI to attempt to heal him, but it does little. And in this deeply disturbing, dramatic moment, Ken says,
Damn it, if this was some dumb RPG, we could hit reset and jump back to before this even happened.
dude.
Life has no reset button. The only thing it has is an off switch. And once you hit that, it's game over.
Dude.
Joe wakes up, commenting on knowing what it's like to be young and in love, which I imagine is deeply confusing for them. Ken tries carrying him back to the van, but it's a fool's errand. Anna begins to pray, offering to sacrifice her hair for them to be saved. Just then, a flying saucer appears, heading straight for them. Anna, panicked, apologizes to God, thinking he's punishing her for a bad joke. This is because in Japanese, the word for hair, kami, is the same as the one for a god, kami, so it was like a bad pun essentially. However, none other than Lloyd is piloting the spacecraft, so slight intermission here in case this isn't clear by this point. Teddy is nowhere to be found in this novel, and Joe is his substitute. So why did Kumi decide to exclude him? Well, I actually think I have a pretty realistic explanation of that, which we'll discuss when more regarding this comes up. Want to point out though, he's very much mentioned on the WikiBound page for this novel though, so someone's caught lacking. They board the spacecraft with Joe and are flown to a nearby secret lab higher up the mountain. Joe is immediately taken in for treatment, and Lloyd introduces Ken and Anna to Dr. Distorto, who's this guy from the game by the way. Just an unimportant enemy in Duncan's factory. Totally unimportant. In the novel, however, he also has a metal claw for a hand. He was a traitor who double-crossed the aliens' leader, Gyug, for advanced technology. He also describes Gyug, which is also quite different from the game. Unlike his sort of alien cat-like body from the game, he's described to look like an insect. A robot also in the room, Eve, has a face that looks like Lloyd's mother's, and interjects that the doctor did what he had to in order to save her, and that she's highly capable but has an outdated chip preventing her from utilizing her full abilities. She reveals Gyug is also in possession of the ultimate reset button, a machine that's to be used to wipe out the entire population of Earth. Lloyd, influenced by her resemblance to his mother, offers the chip from his watch to fix her. Distorto takes it and begins the operation. Lloyd can't watch, saddened, but Ken convinces him to with how interesting it is. Lloyd explains it's personal to look at another person's wiring, but eventually caves. Lloyd then realizes something. He recognizes the wiring. In junction with the use of such an outdated chip that's in his very watch, and Eve's resemblance to his mother, he realizes the true identity of Dr. Distorto. His father. Lloyd, upset, confronts his father about his absence from his life, and Distorto explains he couldn't just go on letting his mother suffer. He further explains Gyug is currently in a cocoon state and now is the best time to attack if they're going to do it. He purposely pushes Lloyd's buttons, trying to provoke the party into attacking, of which Ken gladly takes the bait. Lloyd, however, calmly thanks his father, telling him that they'll be taking Eve for the fight, and they exit the lab, leaving Joe in its care. So, if I may, I'd like to pose a very serious question about this scene. The reveal that Dr. Distorto is Lloyd's long-lost father, and Eve is like his surrogate mother. Is this stupid? Distorto is clearly some sort of code name, since Lloyd didn't recognize it, unless he's dumb not remembering his name is Lloyd Distorto, which would also be stupid, but going with a much more likely codename approach, that is still a really dumb name, I'm sorry. It's far from the worst thing I've ever read, but this all feels so contrived in order to give Lloyd's character some more significance, who didn't even need any sort of provoking to want to save the world. It's just an exposition dump. It's ultimately, spoiler alert, not even really important that he is his father. And Joe could have been taken anywhere to recover since they have the flying saucer. There could have even been some sort of machine on the craft. The only thing that matters to the overall plot here is Eve joining the team, which we'll see why later, but I find this whole scene really cheesy and choppy. I'm sorry, it just feels like such patchwork. Okay, moving on. They fly up the mountain, now with Eve on board as well. At this point, Lloyd kind of takes over as the leader for a bit. He pilots the ship and everyone awaits his command. Anna says he was overly cold to his father before leaving and should apologize, to which he says it was necessary. Anna suddenly sees herself as a nagging mother, and according to herself, needs to see it's, in a sense, time to let her children, Ken and Lloyd, go a bit. She reflects and realizes the two of them have matured considerably since they started traveling together, and this gives her a fresh perspective on Queen Mary's words from before. Eve informs them they're approaching a large robot and missiles, throwing the saucer into a rapid descent. Eve says she's going to suit up and fight the robot, and a comedic moment plays out of her constantly forgetting things, trying to get her equipment to work, waiting for applause, all the vaudeville bits, but not gonna lie, I think it kinda goes on for too long and isn't that funny. Eve actually reminds me quite a bit of Queen from Deltarune and how her bits play out, but unlike Queen, this one isn't that funny and just sort of grinds everything to a halt. She finally is ready and flies out of the saucer, engaging battle with the robot. The trio realizes they've been falling for a while, and crash. Anna regains consciousness and sees they've crashed into a large dome. Above, she can see Eve and the robot are still fighting in the sky. She looks around to see many dirty, depraved, possessed adults, realizing they're the abductees. They all start fighting over Anna, trying to claim her as their own child. She uses PSI to ward some of them away as she searches for the others, but eventually becomes overwhelmed, resorting to using much more powerful magic, flinging them all away. This surge of power, though, leaves her feeling numb and drained. As she starts to collapse, however, Ken catches her. Along with Lloyd, the three reunite. It's revealed, in light of the shock, Anna's hair has turned a pure white color, pun somewhat intended. Horrified, she realizes this was the true price from before, offering her hair to save Joe back down the mountain. Ken reassures her, telling her it's beautiful, and Lloyd says it's stylish, which does make her feel better. Still weak though, Ken offers to carry her. As she climbs onto his back though, there's an earthquake. The massive mothership ascends from the ground, which I imagine looks like this official artwork from a promo for Mother 1. A grating voice starts speaking, bragging about all the power it's accumulated. It's Gyug. The robot defeated, Eve,
who did not die,
comes down, challenging Gyug to a proper fight. Gyug then fires a beam, killing Eve instantly. From her ruins, Eve,
who did die,
reveals the final melody. With the final one collected, the world becomes distorted, and the warriors see several moments from throughout their journey flash before their eyes rapidly, until they see something new. A memory. They see a vision of Ken's great-grandparents, George and Maria, aboard an alien ship they were abducted onto. An alien, Gyug, approaches them, and they discuss how both the alien and Maria are expecting, and Maria shares her lullaby with the alien. From the ship, they can see a comet hurtling towards Earth, which Gyug prevents with their ship somehow. It's left a bit ambiguous. Gyug, hurt, asks Maria to watch over its unhatched egg. This would take 150 years, but the ship has a machine that'd let Maria see it through. As a final request, with its last breath, Gyug asks Maria to name the child Gyug as well, and Maria agrees. Not all went to plan though. George eventually escaped back to Earth, beginning studies in PSI, but died before solving them. Maria stayed back on the ship, but the time capsule had adverse effects on her, transforming her into Queen Mary of Magicant and losing her memories. This led to Gyug's egg hatching without anyone to care for him, leading him down his lonely and destructive path. Suddenly, in the present, Mary's voice can be heard crying out, singing the completed melody, the lullaby. Anna, Ken, and Lloyd all join in. Gyug commands them to stop singing, but more and more people join in, starting with the possessed adults. Eventually, the whole world joins in, even Eve. Overwhelmed, Gyug's power collapses, and he becomes just a child crying out for his mother. He releases the hostages, and the kids reunite with their parents. The ship ascends, and Gyug even reunites with Queen Mary. The world is saved. In the final chapter, rescue efforts are initiated, and people are being sent home from Mount Atoy, including Joe. Real quick, before the story wraps up, let's touch on two things about the previous chapter. The climax definitely has a close encounters of the third kind thing going on, which I like. It's interesting to me though to see how the lullaby ultimately becomes more like a spirit bomb kind of thing. Not particularly passionate about the angle one way or the other. With the world saved though, Anna feels a bit sad, knowing their journey has come to an end. Ken's father shows up in a helicopter from the news outlet he works for, and offers them all a ride home. Ken can sense Anna's reluctance though, and telepathically suggests they all start a new adventure together. The two of them, along with Lloyd, all decide to set out together. The end. Almost. Okay, so here we go. This is the most bizarre part of the novel I'm sure many have been waiting for me to talk about. It is literally the second to last sentence of the entire book. I'd hoped it was just people making it up or misunderstanding something, but no. After Ken proposes a new adventure, it reads, Anna nodded eagerly, and without much thought, she stroked her lower belly gently. Somehow, her smile was not unlike that of Queen Mary. So, what's so off about this? Well, her stroking her belly, along with this direct allusion to Queen Mary, mother of all children, is pretty clearly suggesting Anna, who is 12 years old, is pregnant. I think it's probably suggesting also that Ken is the father, and they conceived during their romantic days. It's very bizarre to say the least, and a real odd note to end the story on. I think it's meant to be like she's inheriting the essence of Queen Mary, and there is a clear theme of motherhood throughout the whole book. I even really like how Gyu kidnaps specifically mothers in search for his own. It's a great touch. But this is really weird. It's weird, and I don't think there's much more to say than that, other than it's at least thematically relevant. So this still leaves quite a few questions unanswered. Where is Teddy? What's with Lloyd's parents and the weird dome thing? Well, I think the afterword actually reveals quite a bit that could answer these questions. Here, the author gives insight to some of the important details about her process when writing the manuscript. The major aspect being, she never made it to Elay. While the novel takes significant creative liberties for sure, many of the much more significant ones are taken starting around this point in the story, and I don't think that's a coincidence. She discusses having played it ahead of its official release to develop her story, and yet she used a walkthrough of some sort to complete it. This walkthrough then must have been put together by someone working on the game, so it may have been as loose as some bullet points, even sounds like it probably was. When you see it through this lens, suddenly many of the interesting, how you say, mutations of elements developed. A gang leader joining the party then severely getting injured on mounted toy. An alien base with hostages, Eve sounding a lot more like Kelly or Nancy than the actual robot, and singing to defeat the enemy. And to be fair, I think she did quite well with what she had. It's certainly not Crime and Punishment or To Kill a Mockingbird, but it's a fun adventure story with really well realized characters. And that's all it needed to be. A couple of other things, she also describes playing the game occasionally with her boyfriend and taking his Famicom virginity. Like, what? And she also says her afterword is a reference to another author, who I'm guessing is Agatha Christie, who did this sort of thing with many of her novels, and her works were popular in Japan, especially then. And that was Mother the Original Story, and boy is it just that, original. I doubt I'll ever read it again, but it was a really enjoyable ride, and I'll always appreciate what it's added to the series. But it doesn't end there. Join me next time when we cover Kumi's official follow-up novel, Mother 2. See you next time.